because I would love to do a wintering one and the myths of wintering, because this time of the year, people don't realize they're talking about putting sugar on the bees. Bees do not eat sugar. Bees have to invert it. And there's scientific evidence, and I can dig it up and give it to y'all this fall. But it takes more energy for them to convert that. And they need moisture. And you're sometimes opening it and you're like, oh my God, they need more sugar. Well, you haven't checked the honey. You haven't lifted the box. And if you got too much honey in there in springtime, you might end up with some swarms. Why do bees swarm? If they don't have room, they swarm. If there's a lot of bees, the pheromone of the queen gets dispersed. And such a small thing, because there's so many bees that they're smelling them and not the queen. And that sends them to the idea, oh, we need to swarm. There's too many of us. Those are things that you have to learn to control. If the queen has nowhere to lay, and there's not the smell of larva, which is a different pheromone, they're like, oh my God, we got to swarm. We've got enough, everything's, but if you got to learn to balance that. And that's beekeeping, and that's being a beekeeper, and not everybody here is going to do that. That's why I'm not telling you my way of beekeeping is right. What you do is right for you, okay? When I started beekeeping, I lost bees. Matter of fact, I didn't even want to be a beekeeper. And we have, in our family, where they went by and they did the censuses years ago, in 1840 we got a beekeeper. That's what they put down for their occupation. My mother's side of the family is commercial beekeepers, several generations. My dad's side of the family is whiskey and horses. And I'm a Vanderbilt dropout because I wanted to join the Marine Corps and I did. But anyway, so you may not want to listen to me because I'm not very smart. But anyway, I looked at different types of beekeeping because I wanted to keep my kids out of trouble. So we did a market farm. And then, of course, kids wanted bees. And they're like, Dad, Granddad's got bees. Your brother's got bees. And it's like, so that's how I ended up with bees. And when the kids grew up, I thought I'd get rid of these damn bees because I didn't like going down there messing with them. But then I was stuck with them. And then the more I messed with them, I started liking them. And I started finding them to be the most fascinating thing that God ever created. And realized that without the bees, there's three things that keep you alive. 6 inches of dirt and the microbes, rain, and God's honeybee. Without them, we would all be dead. So there's different types of configurations. Now, this is the way my bees hives all look right now. They're a single deep. All right? Now, this is HDO board, and I haven't trimmed this board, but normally I got a hole right here where I use a bucket feeder. So I'm going through the winter with this configuration. I use this foil because of the fact that I use migratory lids and I don't use telescoping lids, and moisture sometimes can get through here. But by putting this here, it seals this off so water doesn't get down in here. I use that insulation during the winter time, like you do an inner cover. That gives some, I found it helps the bees a lot in the summertime. I have less bearding. Now, this right here, piece of insulation, I use the condensing hive concept. Now, or they call it condensation. Some people call it condensing hive. Now, David Beck, who works for Better Bee now, and Bill Heshberg, I think's his name, he's an engineer. He has a wonderful, wonderful commentary on this if you want to learn about it, because I'm not going to sit here and talk about that. And it explains why we need insulation. If you believe in Tom Seeley, you believe in Randy Oliver, he even he's got a new presentation out about wintering, and he talks about why he doesn't do certain things because of the type beekeeping he does. But if he was a backyard beekeeper, he would have top insulation. He would have no top entrance. Matter of fact, he is quoted as saying, think about this. You're worried about your resources. The warmer the bees are, the less they have to move around to keep themselves warm. It takes a lot of energy. The less honey that they keep, because they're having to eat more. Randy Oliver says, by using insulation, they use less. He says, it's just like your house. Use some common sense. If your house is comfortable at 70 degrees and you go upstairs and you open the upstairs window, all that cold air comes in. Well, what do? You crank up your heat because you want that oxygen in there, and what does it do to your light bill? That's your resources going out the door. That's just a simple way of explaining it. Now, in America, we ruin everybody. Mr. Warray, everyone knows about the Warray hive, but before the Warray hive, he invented the quilt board. And it was on his observations of trees, kind of like Tom Seeley, about having an insulation at the top. We have quilt boards that we put holes in because we think we have to have ventilation. Well, that's not how they were designed. They were designed with cloth, and it diffuses, I guess is the right word. It diffuses the air as it goes through, and it hits up in the top. They had wood, and it didn't absorb moisture. But what would happen is there's heat up there. And it would, inside the quilt box, it would put the moisture to the sides. And so it didn't drop down on the bees. So you got people that say, oh, what kills my bees? Moisture, cold air. They're both right. But you have to manipulate it. Bees have been doing this for 1,000 years. They control the heating and the cooling of that hive. They control it differently when brood comes. A lot of bees die in the early spring because of weather, how you treated your bees. When they start going through raising brood, it takes a lot of energy. And it's just not the feeding. They have to keep the temperature up higher. They have to get up to 95 degrees to keep that brood alive. That's when most of us lose our bees. They made it through the winter. They were alive February, 1st of March, but now they're dead. They starved to death. And they did, because you didn't have enough resources. Now, the condensation hive, what it does is it's warm. So when moisture goes up, we all understand dew point. Like you're in a car when you were young, maybe parking, you get that little moisture you couldn't see out the window. What'd you do? You cracked the window. It let a little bit of air in. Condensation vanished. And that's where the ideal comes with top ventilation. Well, what else happened in that car? It got cold, so then you turned on the heater. Well, the bees have to be the heater. Now they're burning up resources. Okay, now, by not letting the cold air in, the bees can do what they do naturally, and they've done for millions of years. They can control the heat. CO2 is good for bees. There's a lot of research with CO2. I'm not going to go into all the research. That's another lecture. But see, like when they take a queen to artificially inseminate her, they knock her out with CO2. If they take an artificially inseminated queen and she's not laying right away, they knock her out again with CO2. You know why? It mimics nature. They got that queen in the wintertime. She's in the middle of that brood. And that cluster, the level of CO2 there is extremely high. It slows her down. When they break cluster in the spring, oxygen comes in. She comes out of that CO2 coma and she starts laying. That is a fact. And I can tell you where to find that information. So CO2 is important. CO2 and moisture is important. High humidity is important to bees because bees have to have moisture. They have to have water in order to eat the honey. Now, we don't want it on top of them. So cold air we don't want. It's not good for bees. It makes them work harder. We don't want an open window either at the top, but we want roof above them. The roof above them, the heat comes, whatever moisture they give off is going to hit that roof, and the heat dissipates it to the sides, just like the quilt box does. But it's on the inside of the hive. Now the bees can go over and get the moisture they need on the side of the box. The moisture level is very important, and I'm not going to go into the facts because that's another story about what all moisture does to the bees in the wintertime. High humidity is important and how it cuts down the breeding of mites. Mites don't like high humidity. So anyway, that's how I go through the winter. Now, this box right here, oh, and don't waste your money on those new propolis hives. They were first done by Brushy Mountain years ago. But anyway, this is a plastic box, and look at that. They put propolis on it. But if you want more propolis, just scuff it up any box, and they'll put propolis on it. But anyway, I go through with a single D. And what I do in the wintertime is when you got to know your seasons, you got to know your blooms. I don't worry about the first one in January, late January, early February, but that's something that's important to the bees. Most beekeepers never see some of these minor flows. Did you know elms flow? Hackberry flows? But as fast as it comes in, the bees use it to make babies. They don't make babies on honey. I bet you didn't know that. Everyone thinks, oh, they need that honey. This is another reason. We got a speaker coming that, well, who's coming from Pennsylvania. I forgot his name, and I shouldn't do that, but who? Frank, right. Now, Frank will tell you, double D, if you're successful, you end up with honey over here, honey over there. If you beekeep all year long, you realize that honey's still there in the fall. They didn't use it. Even in the dirt, they didn't use it because it's jerky. That's emergency food. So anyway, so that's why I take all the honey, and a lot of y'all are like, oh my God, he takes all the honey. Well, I have this single D, and I don't want them to swarm. So I know when the main flow starts. I know when my bees are starting to pick up, and I can go into details about white wax and this and that and all the things you look for. But what I do is I come along and I give expansion room, but I show, I put a medium on. Now, it's not my honey mediums. I brought this extra comb here. This comb right here is a honey frame. There is no brood pattern in it. Some of those dark spots there, that's just dirt. That is not pollen, because if it's pollen, it is no longer a honey frame to me. Because my honey frames, Tony's been out my place, I don't put anything on them. Okay, airflow, 8 frames in a box, they're fine. But I have a container out there that you don't want to be with me without a mask when I put 3 little tablets in there every 2 months until the cold season comes, because it sucks all the oxygen out. A lot of commercial beekeepers do that. You might, I don't know if you do it or not, Nelson, but I put on this comb. Yeah, I gas them. And so this right here, these are, I have 2 types of mediums. This had brood in it. So, and if I ever get pollen in one, and that's another trick to keep the pollen out of your honey frames, the wax moths go after it. If a wax moth gets in this, it'll grow like an inch and it'll die and the bees will fix it. I don't worry about it. But these, I take these out and I throw these on top of my bees. And I'm going to do this in March. Now, believe it or not, they can smell that there's been brood up there before. Now, what I do is I've given them expansion room. There is no queen excluder. I'm going to let the queen come up here and expand to stop the swarming. Now, the bees are going to make their little babies, and Malcolm's going to come along in April, about the 2nd week, sometimes the 3rd week, depending on our flows. You got to know your flows and what's going on with your weather. And I'm coming here and I'm shaking every bee off of these boxes. Every bee. Every one of these bees is gone. They're all down in the bottom box again. And then I'm going to come along and I'm going to put a queen excluder. She's down there. Now, I'm going to put a super on here. I use these plastic mother load supers. They're good. If you leave your bees outside, your plastic frames, they're good. Now, so here's a place for them to put honey. And above that, I stick the brood. They smell that brood, they're going to take care of it. They're going to come through the queen excluder. You always heard things that queen excluders are really brood excluders and honey excluders. You got to train them. They're livestock. They're like your dog. You got to train your dog. Otherwise, your dog's going to piss in your house. Okay? You want to control where they do and what they do. So now, these bees come through here and they see a place to store honey. When the flow starts, these bees are going to come here and they're going to backfill this box. Now, something I do, and I suggest you do it, is I run 9 frames. Well, even with this brood, there's 9 frames. There's 10 frames in the main brood box, but there's 9 here. And the reason for that is, and you can get these spacers, don't ever get a plastic one, because you're wasting your money. You come down here and it perfectly spaces them out for you. You want the cappings to be a little bit wider than that, because if you don't, you're going to have some ugly, ugly wax. When you go to cut it off, you want fresh wax to expand. And you'll also get more honey. Yeah, you don't want to spray paint. Yeah, it's a mess. But anyway, so I do that. And usually, if it's a good flow, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to under super. Now, how many of y'all get three mediums of honey? Tony gets 3 mediums. Now, that's 90 some odd pounds of honey plus. You should get between 30 and 45 pounds per medium. Now, what I don't have, that people that run double deeps have, they have a lot of honey in that double deep, in that top box. Now, there's a girl, I thought she was going to show up tonight. I mentored her, and she's from Poland, and she worked with me for a whole year. And she's telling me about YouTube this, YouTube that, how much honey I got to leave on. So I left a thing of honey. I left a medium of honey on 1 box. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. Now, this is the way I go. I also do some comb honey. That's a different setup. But anyway, when it comes time to harvest the honey, I take a few more and I take all that honey. I take this away. Don't use that anymore. This goes on there. And let me see what my top's right in front of it. I mean, you're seeing that little yellow cap, you know. But anyway, these haven't been cut yet. That's new. So anyway, as soon as I take the honey, the same day I take it, I come along and I throw food on there. Because they had no food. I took all their food. Now, bees, we had a speaker here last year who came representing the University of, what is it, Giuseppe in Canada? Anyway, but he was from Mexico. And he said something at the table I was sitting at. Everyone's like, hey, Malcolm, you were right. He said the only place he's ever seen double deeps, parts of Canada, the United States, and Europe. Eastern Europe, Asia, South America, everyone else, they run what? Single deep hives. I don't care if you've got a bee that runs 2,000 eggs, which is rare, a day. Average for a good queen is 1,500. You count your cells. I think it's 80 across, 44 down, I think. You know, when you add it up, and then you do 20 sides, you know, because there's 10 frames, 20 on each side. I think you come up, there's 70,000 some odd holes, or maybe 80,000. I'm not going to do the math, can't do it in my head. But anyway, at 2,000, she can't do what? In 21 days, how many has she done? 40,000? At her max. There's 30,000 more empty spots. So the queen has plenty of places, as long as you give them a place to put the honey. But I don't know if I would do this on 8 frames, but I like 10 frames because they're going to bring in honey, and they're going to bring in pollen, and they're going to keep a lot of the pollen down there. But they'll move the honey up at night. So they need a place to do that. Now, I'm feeding them. I'm taking care of all this. Once I do all my extracting, I come back. Depending on, I do that in the VR. Anyway, everything's got to have dual purpose. This is an emery shim. It's got a hole in it. And you notice that I took the hole's not covering it, and I missed a step. When I do have my boxes up there, I do put this there, so they have a top entrance. But I take that and I put tape over it, and I do my treatment, usually Apagard. Apagard can be used up to 105 degrees. You cannot put 50 milligrams on. Go to the website. Instead of treating it twice with 50 milligrams, I treat it 4 times with 25 milligrams. It's 100% natural, just like oxalic acid. One thing I skipped is in the early spring, I do oxalic acid treat my bees with 4 grams per box. Can't legally tell you to do that, but the scientists at 3 different labs figured that's the sweet spot. So anyway, I go in here and treat it. And if I use Apagard, the strips, I don't need 4. I just need 2. Now, at first, you're going to see lots of bees hanging out. And every time I mentor someone, I'm like, oh my God, you're going to kill all them bees. They don't all fit in the box. But guess what? The girl that was with me, we left a medium on. The first thing she said was, oh my God, they're not hanging out. I said, but I guarantee you, most of them bees will be gone the next time we come back to this yard. Because as the flow quits, and it's already quit by the time you've harvested, grabbed, and take the supers, she's cut back on her laying. Because she knows nothing's coming in. So she doesn't lay as much. It's either her or the bees. The bees decide everything. If she is still laying, they just eat the eggs. What happens next is they regulate their space. Tom Seeley and several other people have always said, what's the perfect size for a beehive? It's a size of a 10 frame deep. So they're happy and content there. Going back to the one that had the medium on it, we left. She yells at me, you've been back to this yard. I said, how have you been with me every day? You must have come out here one night. I said, what do you mean? She said, there's nothing in that medium. I said, that's because we didn't feed them, because you said that was enough to leave them. 40 pounds, they were good. She says, it's all gone. I said, because we have a dearth. This is Oklahoma. This isn't Ohio or someplace you watched on YouTube. It's location, location, location. Our bees shut down. They're not bringing anything in, really, from the last week of June. Now, they're going to die off. These are old bees. They're worn out. So these bees that are worn out, they're going to die anyway. So the population is going to be gone. The brood nest is going to function much better at a temperature that they can regulate in the hot sun. You can come by my place. Tony's been over there, 100 degrees outside. You see bees hanging off my boxes? And they're singles. Because all those other bees are gone. There's no reason for them. She's not producing much more because she doesn't see a room for it. They don't want to swarm. If you got bees that swarm this time of year, you don't want them. Okay, because they're like my brain. It's retarded. I mean, you know, they're not going to make it. You don't want to breed from those queens. I'm just going to be honest. The other day, we had a warm spell and had a neighbor tell me, you got a swarm over here in my yard, over by my dogs. I said, I ain't got no swarm this time of the year. He said, I'm telling you, I went over, there was a swarm. I grabbed a regular bucket and I just stuck them in the bucket and I sealed the top. He said, why are you sealing the top? Are they going to smother? I said, yeah. He said, well, I said, well, they're not going to live. They're idiots. They're going to die. They can't draw comb this time of the year. You know, I don't have any comb. I want to go get them. I'm not going to feed them. So I'm going to let them die. Now, somewhere out in that yard, I got a beehive. I know they didn't requeen, so they're probably going to die too. Now, I don't consider those losses. That's nature. The gentleman over there, David, has been to Iceland. He also uses insulation on the top. And he will tell you, it will change your beekeeping. When I started listening to these people and doing the research, because I want to know why my bees were dying. And I came up with a lot of information. This fall, spring, a lot of you are going to go in there and you're going to say, oh, my bees, they died from moisture, because you're going to see mold and you're going to see dampness and no food. That it wasn't moisture. When you die, if you died on this carpet, there's going to be a wet spot because moisture your body's going to leave. Moisture is going to come off their bodies and it's going to be there and it's going to cause mold. And the bees will clean it up the next go around. Okay, that's just life. all right? So they did not die from moisture. They just looked wet because of the moisture that came out of their bodies and the moisture that was on the walls after they died, or they starved to death. All right? Now, so I can do my treatments. After all my treatments are done, I do a mite count. I only do a couple of bees in a yard. Then this comes off. This goes on. I usually have a hole up here in that. I got a hole here. And I only fed them once. And that was to keep them from starving. I'm going to feed every week now. And I'm going to feed less than 1-to-1 because it mimics nectar flow. I don't want my queen to totally shut down. I want her to know something's coming in and she's going to continuously lay a little bit. But that's called trickle feeding. That keeps her stimulated, keeps the bees happy. And guess what else it does in your yard? There's no reason to rob. I haven't seen robbing in years in my yards. Now, I have two different type yards. I have what I call home yards, and I have 2 home yards. I own property in Yellow, Oklahoma, and I have a house there, and I have a lot of bee supplies, and I deal with a lot of beekeepers out in West. I have a home yard in Tulsa. Tony's been to it. There's sometimes 60, Dane's been to it. I think the time Dane was there was 80 hives there. Now, you can't support 80 hives on food. Those are yards that I'm making babies. I'm making queens. And so, if you go in that yard, sometimes you're going to see 2 double deeps. You might see a deep and a medium. What I do in that yard there is I've made queens all throughout the season. And towards the end of the season, I keep a queen, and then I put her in a double, a nuke over a nuke. Or if I sold more queens than I really wanted to, because I didn't want to sell it, but someone cried, I knew them, I'm like, okay, I'll sell you a queen. So now I need to do something with all this comb, so they end up sometimes 1 queen and her babies, you just throw them all together. And you stack it up over winter double deep in that yard, because it's storing comb. But that's not what I normally do. But anyway, I trickle feed these bees. Now, we want the winter bees. I do open feeding. One of our speakers, I think her name's Londi, she's coming, and I know this woman, and she taught me something 15 years ago about open feeding. I feed with 5-gallon buckets. She feeds with 5-gallon buckets because she says she's a woman and she can't lift anything else. Well, I do it because it's easy, it's fast, and these bee rafts used to be $5. This one here is about 14 years old. They sold their whole distributorship to Daydamp, and now they're like $15 a piece. But these things will last, so they're worth the investment. I take a 5-gallon bucket, some 60 grit sandpaper, because if you rough up the sides, the bees can climb up and down the bucket. This thing right here has got a little place that the water can go through, there's syrup. You set this in there and it will float. If you have drowning bees, you need another bucket, because the bees will climb on top of one another. So usually in one of my yards, I keep between 8 and 10 hives, and I go out there with about 20 buckets, and I throw this on here, because I'm trying to put a lot of food on them really fast. And it's really funny. I can put a 2-gallon bucket on this hive, every one of my hives, and it'll take them a week to a week and a half to take it down. I can go out there with 5 gallons worth of syrup for every hive, and in 2 days, the most, it's all gone. Now, and some people are like, you're feeding all the other bugs. You might see a few, I don't know, yellow jackets, but not that many. Because you'll go to your hives and you lift them and they're heavy like a brick. So now that I have enough syrup, and sometimes I'll trickle feed them a little bit until November. It's come winter time now, I want to make sure they're heavy. I lift them, make sure, and then I do something a lot of you don't want to do if you got a lot of hives. Now, I myself, I went from taking care of the kids' bees to my bees that I didn't think were going to expand, but I just like making bees. The next thing you know, I had 230 some odd hives. And I think the most I ever had was like about 240. They worked me to death, but I was making money. You know, and here's another reason for single deeps. On that picture she put up there, you'll notice there's a bunch of single deeps in the back of the truck. Well, I had that many hives, but I sure didn't make enough money to buy a forklift. I didn't have a tractor with forklift things, so I could see, I was like, how am I going to move these bees? Trying to find somebody to come help you carry bees is hard to do. Even a woman can pick up a single deep. You just go, all you got to do. Now, in the wintertime, most of the boxes I build myself, there is no bottom part underneath this where it's two-sided, because I lay mine on brick old blocks, because there's no vibration going to the next hive to piss them off and get them irritated by the time you get there. They feel vibration. Put them on a single block, you have less drift. But the 2 blocks, I don't want to have black widows under there. When you buy those hives, you know, that are double-sided, black widows, they like to make their homes down there. Yeah, and I don't like to wear gloves, okay? And I picked up boxes, I'm like, oh my God, thank you, Jesus. You know, so I make all mine like this. All right, it's a lot less expensive. You don't have to be a great carpenter. But I've gone to all 3/8. Now this one here is 3/4 because I had 3/4 wood. Now, but here's what's wonderful about, I leave this in year round on these, because the ones that I make myself at 3/8, I just put a piece of wood across here and leave a 4-inch opening. And I leave it in there all year long. They can guard this with no problem. You don't want it too small on that little small one for wintertime on your reducer, because if they get too many dead bees, and it'll clog up. You don't want that. This right here is like perfect, and the entrance there is 3/8 of an inch right here in height. Don't buy mice guards, because mice can't get in 3/8 of an inch. It'll save the hobbyist a lot of money if they knew this. So I do that. But now that it's wintertime, I've already open fed everybody. I trickle feed them until it gets cold. And then I come and do the hardest part of getting ready for fall. I manipulate my hives frames. Now, when I say manipulate them, you're taught to keep that brood in the middle. And that's great in the springtime. It's another reason I don't reverse. Bees don't, when you have a double deep, why are you throwing them down there with a cold entrance? She's at the top for a reason. She's trying to maintain the heat. You get them down there and it's too cold, you're going to see chilled brood pulled out the front. I don't believe in reversing. In a hive, in a tree, they don't do it. Once the honey flow comes in, they backfill and they push the queen down. There's no reason for you to flip boxes if you're running double deeps. But anyway, what I want to do is I want to keep my bees from starving. Bees will sometimes starve, and there's food. How many people here have opened their hives? You found honey. The bees weren't on it because they moved one way. It got cold, and they can't work their way back over because they can't break cluster. But on the ones that I build, I've always got my opening over here, and I just take a single piece of wood over here and then just make that entrance. In the fall, they're always going to have 1 or 2 frames that they're working brood on. Those go by the front door so she can control the atmosphere that the bees want to raise that brood. I stick all the honey over here. That also keeps the robbers from smelling it. So I put all the honey to the left, the open brood over here to the right. Then come November, I do something people in here have told me, you can't do that, your bees won't survive. I plug them out. I put as much food out there as they'll take until they won't take any more. And people are like, you can't do that because the heater bees have to stick their heads in the empty slots. Well, guess what? It's warm in November here. It's warm in December. They will eat that honey first. They will provide a place, okay? And I've never lost bees from that. So now, when my bees start eating, they're on a frame. But guess what's next to them? Another frame, and then another frame, and then another frame. They have no reason to go back here where there's no food. So where you have the bees in the middle, if they go over to the left to eat and they can't get back, like you've seen, they starve. And you have honey. Now, another thing with the condensation hive, and I will give y'all places y'all can go look, or I'll put them on the NEOBA site. What they have found, and the gentleman that's coming from Pennsylvania, I don't know why I can't remember his name, I really like him, Frank, he's Italian. Anyway, Frank will tell you, and Paul Hischamoy up in Connecticut will tell you, up there they always tell you got to have 100 pounds. Got to have 100 pounds to make it through the winter. Hope that it's not a bad winter. That's the old saying. When you use the condensation hive, you need 45 pounds. They have found that. Now, the worst thing you can have, now here in Oklahoma, I won't go by that, because we have so many warm periods of time our bees are flying. When they're flying, they're burning up resources. Sometimes if it's a long stretch, I do open feed. Mike, who's not here tonight, he open feeds also in the winter time when we have to. When we have like 3 weeks of ungodly strange weather in January, cold is the best thing for your bees. They will hover. They will get down, their metabolism will slow down with high areas of CO2, unless you've got a top vent, and then they'll eat less. If you've got that open vent, they're going to eat more. But with the no top entrance and the condensation hive, the principles, most people have found that bees eat a third of what they normally eat. Now, that can bother you sometimes in the spring because you can't have swarming because you got too much food. You know? But anyway, so I don't feed my bees sugar. I don't put fondant on my bees. I have no reason to put pollen on. If you live here in Oklahoma, we always got pollen. Always. Unless you're taking your bees to the almonds, that's a different type beekeeping. Those guys want to build bees up when I want my bees to go to sleep. I think the worst bee is an Italian. That's my opinion. It's terrible for the backyard beekeeper, the hobbyist. You got a bee that wants to eat you out of house and home. And you need, and right, am I wrong? But you want that if you're going to the almonds, because you need bees. They judge you and rate you and about how many frames of bees you have. Most of you hobbyists, you're trying to get your bees through the winter. You're working a job. I used to work a job I know. Now bees are my job. And so you don't always have the time to get out there. When you get too many bees, when I had 200 and some odd bees, I got a bumper sticker that says, hey, real beekeepers do it in the rain. I had somebody with me this past summer. He was with me. He's like, oh my God, we're getting ready to leave. It's raining. I'm like, no, I ain't got time. I got to get this done. You're there. You got to do it. You know, the bees' attitudes change, but you got to do it. It's a different type beekeeping. But the backyard beekeeper doesn't need to worry about his bees starving to death. He needs to get away from the myths and read the scientific stuff that's out there that's been proven. And it's really nothing new. It's just scientists that prove what bees have been doing for thousands of years. They want a cavity the size of a 10-frame box. They want a single entrance. They don't want to ventilate because they want to control the temperature. They're marvelous the way they control temperatures. It's amazing what this little creature with a brain the size of a pinhead can do and what they know. They need moisture. Did you know with research they have found the number one waggle dance that bees do is not for nectar, but water. It's important. It's an important resource. They need it in the wintertime also, but they don't need it to drop. So the people that say, oh, the cold killed my bees, they're right. But so are the people that said, oh, the moisture killed my bees. They're right, because these people are using screen bottom boards, 2 entrances. Yeah, the cold's coming in. Yeah, the moisture's falling on your bee's head. And somebody told some of them, pick up the back of the hive so it leans forward so they won't die. But do you see commercial beekeepers doing that? No. But most commercial beekeepers are keeping very strong colonies with a lot of heat. And they have no top entrance. Okay? And they're not losing their bees. They're selling to the hobbyist. So when hobbyists are saying, oh, you got to do it this way, and they want to fight and argue with you, there's some in this room here that have been doing that to me for years. I've sold some of them bees, many times. And I'll tell them, they'll still fight me. And I'm like, man, I'm just glad I don't do beekeeping like you don't say it to their face. So, but they do. They'll argue. There's some old men in here. Of course, I'm an old man now. I'm right at 70. But I don't consider myself old, but I don't know. but the thing is, you've got to realize that you've got to read if you want to be successful as a beekeeper. Beekeeping is the most expensive hobby you will ever have, okay? And it takes a lot of bees to make any money. When you sit there and you look what you can make on one hive and you think you're going to make a living, let me tell you something. You can't make a living unless you want to live on about $25,000, $30,000 a year. You need 100 hives, okay? To make a decent living, you need a minimum of 200 hives. And then you got to learn to work smart. I can go in another lecture here. I don't go through every single frame. There are people that I come out and mentor, and they're like, well, that's not what I was taught. And I'm like, well, I don't have all day. And you're going to get the same results. I don't have to see the queen. And you have to learn certain basics. Even when I ran double deeps, when I had this as a double deep. And another thing you can do if you're trying to get maximum honey is if you are running a double deep, you can go through here in the spring, take all your empty comb, put it up at the top, at the bottom. Your brood comb, put all your ones that have honey or ones that are getting ready to emerge and put them on the top. Put a queen excluder between the two. Let this hatch out and let them backfill this. And you're running, some people call that running single hive management, and it is in a way. But when you're a commercial beekeeper, you're not going to take this box here and go through every single hot button frame and go over here. First thing you're going to do in the spring, you learn how far to pull this back. It asks me how I know. And if you go too far this way, they'll fall over, and you got bees everywhere. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, you learn to flip that box right here. You just drag it back, flip it over. It's heavy. But before you do it, you do something else. But you can go right here and count the frames. I show my people, you don't have to pull frames to see if they got honey. I don't even know what I do with my hive tool. Oh, anyway, you just stick the hive tool in here and you go back and forth. You got honey on it, you got honey. It's no big deal. All right? There's all kinds of things learning about how to get your bees to move up. There's other discussions on about how to break the honey band. There's reasons that I have drawn comb, also because of the fact that I will sometimes pull frames out of the middle if they have a honey bound, well, what do you call the ring up there? I'll pull out 2 frames before I put the other medium on, but I got a container full of foundation, and I'll put it right there in the middle of her brood nest. Then it's opened up, and then they'll come right on up. You got to train them to come up. You don't want them to swarm on you. And when you have a double deep, and you're lucky enough not to have it on pallets, when it's glued together, you can lay it on its side and you can read all the frames that way. But meanwhile, these are all stuck together, so they didn't have to come apart. So you do it as a unit. Then you do this. There's all kinds of ways that you change as a commercial beekeeper or as a sideliner. I never consider myself a commercial beekeeper. Greg Hannaford said, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm a sideliner. He said, no, you're not. I said, Greg, I am a sideliner. I only got a couple of hundred hives. I don't have that many now. I'm slowly reducing. I sold 100 and some odd hives to a guy gave me a really good price, not far from Ed. And he's sitting back there. I know what he's doing on that phone. I know what game he's playing. But Ed is a great guy. If y'all don't know Ed, he used to be the president here for years. Ed runs the Drumright Beekeeping Club. And he will tell you, do not let Malcolm in your door. If he says, I've been up for 2 days and I've been drinking a lot of coffee, he's like, oh, shit. And he said, just sit in the back corner and you run your own group. But anyway, Ed's a great guy, and he's got a great bunch of people out there. But there's a lot to beekeeping. There's a lot of ways to keep your bees. But you can be a hobbyist and just put the bees out there, a bee haver, let them die and not worry about it. Or you can become a real beekeeper and say, why are my bees dying? What did I do wrong? What can I learn from it? And don't listen to someone. I'm going to tell you somebody, I said to his face, Michael Palmer. Don't listen to Michael Palmer about overwintering bees. Yeah, Michael Palmer runs about 1,000 bees. Michael Palmer has been found at the last 2 national honey shows, and each time he has lost 55 to 60% of his hives. Well, he's done this most of his life. And he's always blamed it on something. That's why he started doing the resource hives. Did you know that? Because of his winter losses. Now, do you know what Michael Palmer does that the other beekeepers up there don't do? Michael Palmer, because of the snow, he thinks he has to have an upper entrance. Michael Palmer has a lot of moisture problems, but he blames it on the snow. Bees can actually take high levels of CO2. I read a paper that they don't actually breathe the oxygen that we breathe when they're flying around, that they change it because they can't take that much oxygen. I don't know how they change it. It was all scientific, and I'm like, I don't know what these words mean. But I was reading, and that's why I say become a beekeeper. Start reading. Don't listen to the guy down here that's losing half his hives every year. If he's losing 30%, there's something wrong. David back there will tell you when he started doing insulated tops, what did your success rate go to overwintering? 100%. Exactly. Last year, the girl I was training, I marked several hives with red bricks. I think I told this today, I marked with red bricks. I said, these bees are not going to make it through the winter. She's like, well, don't we need to merge them? No, I don't do that. I don't care if they die in the wintertime. It's just more combs that are stored through the winter. This spring, do not tell anybody on Facebook, because Bob Martin's going to chew you another one. Your bees did not die from wax moths. Your bees were dead, and wax moths are opportunists, and they're designed by God to come in there and clean up the mess, and then a new swarm of bees comes in and replaces everything. That's nature. All right? There were no wax moths around in the early spring. They're not out yet. It's too cold. Those wax moths got into your hives in the fall. You're a bad beekeeper. I'm going to make you mad. I don't care. Because here's the kind of person I am. My banker doesn't know who you are. All right? My investment guy doesn't know who you are. The guy I buy my bullion from, he doesn't know who you are. So you don't mean anything. You're not that important that I should give you more respect than I do anyone else. I want to knock some sense into you because I don't want you to lose the money that I have lost. Because I thought I knew everything and I didn't want to listen to my relatives that were commercial beekeepers. Because people told me commercial beekeepers are evil. All right? They were killing their bees. They were mean to their bees. They're fogging them to death with chemicals. I fell for all that. And I don't want you to do it. I want you to become beekeepers. I want you to read. And I didn't stay on my thing. That's why I wrote this down so I wouldn't. But I'm going to give you some quick information. Let y'all. There's a woman named Peggy DeSanto. She invented the hive hugger. She did a lot of research, and there's a reason for it. And it deals with the condensation hive. Bill Heshbeck, he's an engineer and with a doctorate degree. He is, and I say with a doctorate because my dad it's Dr. Megibben. Well, it's because he has a PhD. Medical doctors are not doctors, they're MDs, okay? I'm just going to put that straight out there for you. That makes my uncle mad. But anyway, Randy Oliver, Tom Seeley, David Beck, Frank Licata, all these guys can help you with everything that I've told you tonight, okay? They've got the research, they've got the experience, they've done the grants, they've written the papers, so it didn't come off the top of my head. I didn't do what the neighbor told me, because when I did that, my bees died, okay? And beekeeping with 2 hives and the equipment you need, you're going to end up with a couple $1,000s. That's a very expensive hobby. Most of this room should be packed with beekeepers. Every year, if you knew the number of people that took our classes, okay? If they were all still beekeeping, but 80% failed the first year. After the first year, a couple of them, they'll try again, and then they fail. Then they're like, I'm throwing money away. And you know what the problem is? They don't come to classes, they don't come to meetings, and they don't learn from other beekeepers. They go to YouTube. Yeah. All right? Yeah. And I'm not trying to, there's some good information on YouTube. There's some great guys. That's why Bob Benning went out there, because of that. He's a wonderful man. I know him. I've known him for 7 years now. But here's the thing. I don't want you to lose money. I want us to find a way to retain these beekeepers. So NEOBA is the largest beekeeping group in the country. Because we go through beekeepers, but we got to retain those beekeepers. We got to show them the correct way to beekeep, what's been proven. Let them try it. Don't let them lose their money. Okay? I mean, I could make a lot of money in July. I have so many people calling me for queens, and they don't need it. I was making good money. Then all of a sudden, my wife gets on to me. I started saying, have you seen your queen? I don't know what she looks like. And I hear that all the time. Beekeepers have been doing it for 3 or 4 years. I go to their house, and I'm like, well, there's your queen. If I had sold them this queen, my queen would die, or their queen would die. Most likely their queen, and I tell you why. There's a difference between a laying queen and a mated queen. If I take a queen out of this box, and there's no queen in this box, I can set her on the frame, she will crawl right in and nobody's going to kill her. You know why? Her pheromones are so strong, she's a laying queen, they can smell. If I took that queen, 2 mated queens will not kill one another. That's bogus, that's BS, and assumptions, not based on anything. If you have 2 queens in a beehive, only one's going to stay there. The bees are going to decide for themselves, and they will ball. Not the queen's going to kill the other queen, but the bees will ball the queen with the least amount of pheromone. Okay, the queen didn't do it. 2 virgins will kill one another. You know, they're looking for a fight. You know, they're like drunk Marines. They're like, beep, 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 where you at? Beep, 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 come on. You know, they will kill one another. All right? But a mated queen, if you take her, and I put her in a container, and I send you home with her, if you leave her out, you don't put her in the hive right away, you'll be calling me saying, that don't look like the queen I bought because she got small. Within 18 hours, the queen's pheromones change. She's a mated queen. This is why a lot of bought queens that are shipped, when you get them, they've been banked for a long time. Especially if you get the early queens. They didn't make these early queens right now, they banked them. If you go to a queen producer, they bank queens all winter long. All right? Now, those will be the worst queens you buy. And there are guys that I'm going to make mad here, but you're selling nukes with the earliest queens you can buy. And most of those queens are going to be replaced. And they may not be successful replacements if they don't requeen themselves, because those are poor queens. When their ovaries shut down, they never really build back the same as they used to, unless it's under high CO2 conditions. They have found that the cold weather, where they're being transported in planes, affects, it's not really affecting her eggs, it's affecting the semen. It's like when I go to make queens in the springtime, I don't care what color the eyes are on that drone, okay? That doesn't mean anything to me. The purple eye just means I know it's not ready. Walking around doesn't mean I can go make queens. What you need to do is pick up a bee, and you're going to have to realize the drone will not sting you. It's going to die anyway. His whole purpose is to have sex and die, all right? You take him, and you put him between your fingers, and you squish him, and you push out his genitalia out the back end. His genitalia is going to look like this. It's got 2 looking like horns, like a woman's, what the tubes that go up to the ovaries? Fallopian tubes. Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. Now, if they're white, he's adult, but guess what? He's not producing any semen yet. Now, the second thing you look at is that if they're starting to turn tan, really light, there'll be a little round ball. And if it's white, pearly white, his semen's not mature. Okay? Now, it's just like a young male. He's not making until he gets a little bit older before he starts producing viable semen. Now, if it's kind of halfway dark, he's not going to. But when it looks like, you ever seen a spider's egg sac when it's brown? When it's brown like that, chocolatey light brown, he's mature. When you can find them like that, they're ready to mate. And if you start breeding queens too early, there might be only a handful of them out there that have viable semen. And that affects the quality of your bee, your queen. But queen producers don't care. They're trying to produce bees as fast as they can, sell them to you as fast. I bet you've bought a lot of queens, haven't you?
I buy the cells.
Huh?
I buy the queen cells.
Okay, now yeah, it's a lot better. Now.
A lot cheaper too.
Not cheap. And, but the other thing is, with a queen, Chris Warner, who's an awesome guy. Matter of fact, one of his guys that works with him, Andy Heckman, stopped by and they're taking stuff down to Florida now. They're getting ready to make queens. And he stopped by on my birthday and we had dinner. We met a few years back, so he kind of makes some little maneuvers. It's kind of nice to have friends in the bee business. And they're getting ready to make queens now. But Chris Warner, there's a 6-year waiting list for his queens. And you can go to Bob Benny's site. The longer a queen lays, past 14 days, the better queen she is. Okay? And because her ovaries get to warning, but if you pull her out too soon, before 21 days of laying, she never produces into the queen she should. They have evidence, they got reported, and there's only a few beekeepers that do it. All right? When I sell my queens, I've got them, but I tell you, they're not ready. You can also, you got to judge them, because just because I got a queen and she's laying doesn't mean she's a good queen. I have queens and I flood my yard. Well, Tony left. Tony's seen how I flood. Tony's bringing nukes over to my place because I put green comb in every one of my hives. You are lucky to get a queen to get mated by more than 20 drones. I make sure there's 100 plus for every queen. And there's people that say things, but they haven't worked the hives. They're only going to make drones for so long. All right? Unless the bees see a reason. Once they've harvested all the drones they want on that frame, I'm throwing 3,000 out per hive. Okay? That's a lot of drones. But every one of mine has a green comb.
What is a green comb?
It is a drone comb. They paint them green so people know that it's a drone. It's got the drone cell size. And when you want to get one drawn, put some extra wax on it and stick it in the middle of the brood nest so they'll draw it. But then every year I keep it off to the side. They're going to use it, okay? If not, if you have no drone comb in your car and you've got some beautiful wax, they will stretch it and they will ruin your good wax. Yeah. So if you put a drone comb in there, you keep them from doing that. So you keep your good wax, your good cells, so you produce more. And the other thing is, because you know what they do in your brood nest with that stretched out comb? Once they got the drones they want, they don't keep making them all year long. That IBC, or whatever you call it, doesn't really work because they backfill it with what? Nectar. They love the science for nectar. That's the first thing they put in it, isn't it? Nelson will tell you, they put nectar in it. And so it's going to be nectar all year long. So I have drone comb. And so I want to make sure my queens, so queens are very important to the whole process. So when you become a beekeeper, learn to make your own queens. I invite so many people over to my place to learn to make queens. I have taught people like James. I have taught Jay Idle. And you know what? They're still my best customers. That's just too much work. But anyway, I thank y'all and be glad that I didn't go into all the details of where all the information came from. I just want everyone to learn and for all of us to help other beekeepers. And when you're a mentor, go and help these people, show these people, but make sure before you're a mentor that you yourself are a beekeeper and not a bee haver. Thank you for your time.